All right, you guys miss me? I'm back. So that was a really perfect way to tee up this panel because Congressman Fleischman really understands the S&T and National Lab and appropriations congressional perspective well. And so, that was the legislative perspective. Now we've got the, entrepreneur and investment and doer perspective. Anyway, I wanted to turn to Nat first. Nat, you're the Chief Energy Officer of Tract. You've got a background of having been at AWS for quite some time before Tract. You were involved in really AI before AI was popular in terms of helping it scale. And so I'm curious from your perspective, how have you seen that change over that time? And give us a sense of just tell us more about Tract. What do you guys do? What is your unique value proposition and kind of how that landscape has changed for you really since you started?
Thanks for the question, Drew, and thanks to the audience for having us all. This has been a really energizing series of discussions over the last couple of days. First of all, Tract Capital Management is an alternative asset management platform that sits over two companies. One is Tract, which is a powered land development company that does horizontal development for data centers of the future. We believe those data center campuses of the future will be in the 1 to 2 gigawatt scale. When I think back in my days, I spent almost 13 years at Amazon launching data centers around the world. The building blocks that we looked at a decade ago are not the building blocks of the future, not only for AI data centers, but also for enterprise and compute that's happening inside data centers. To go accommodate that, what Tract does is goes and secures 1,000 to 2,000 acre assemblages, does all of the zoning entitlement, wet and dry utilities, and oftentimes power infrastructure underwriting. One of the things that continues to fascinate me, having been in the energy space and data center digital infrastructure investing space, is the amount of capital required right now is sometimes being underscored by people who are trying to seek development. And I would say, woe to the party that thinks that they can go just submit a load letter to a utility and expect a response. It'd be kind of like if you wanted a refund on your taxes and sent an email to the customer service department at the IRS. You might hear something back in 6 to 7 years, which would be a scheduled robocall or something. But so we get very intimately acquainted with the utilities on the power curation side, and to that effect, we've deployed almost $3.5 billion across 10 markets in the U.S. That's around 25,000 acres, 20 gigawatts of planned capacity for hyperscalers. The second business that we're focusing on is a vertical built-to-suit data center development with a business called Fleet. And again, when I think about why I've hitched my wagon to this group of really experienced, extraordinary digital infrastructure investors and builders, is because the building block that we worked on over the last 15 years since the cloud has really emerged into the public domain is just totally outpaced. I remember the first time, I'm from Seattle, Washington, originally a farm kid from South Dakota, baling hay, so this, it's kind of wild to be up in these rarefied halls sometimes. But I think about the first time I came to IAD and I went to Dominion, and I went and said, we would like 10 megawatts for one of our data centers in Northern Virginia. And that was almost like kind of going to Kmart. You go sign your GS3 or GS4 tariff, and it's done. And they're like, hey, this is the first time we've actually talked to an energy person. Most of the time, the people who came to talk to us were some random tech employee wearing cargo shorts and flip-flops and a Hawaiian shirt. And that was just because energy was not the critical feedstock that has come to dominate digital infrastructure. So I think the big change is that we're not talking about 5, 10 megawatt data centers or even 50 megawatt data centers. We're talking about contiguous campuses that are 1 to 2 gigawatts. And the reason why that's so critical, we're talking a lot about power, and that certainly is the vanguard discussion. But one of the things that is really, really underappreciated is the level of community willingness to have this level of investment in their regions. And we've seen this borne out in Northern Virginia. I've been firsthand seeing this borne out in Singapore, Ireland, Frankfurt, you name it, anywhere around the world. People love the tax revenues that accrue as a result of data center development. They love the job creation. They absolutely hate cooling and backup diesel gen sets in their backyard. And we think that responsible development means master plan zoning at the big scale where you harvest all the benefits that accrue as a result of digital infrastructure investment, along with the exogenous investments that come with renewable energy and decarbonization, but you have to plan it thoughtfully.
Yeah, so Craig, from your perspective, I mean, you've been previously at Invenergy, so you've been on the development side, but now you're on the power supply side. Tell us a little bit about Mainspring. What do you guys do, and what is your value proposition to help guys like Nat fulfill the vision of building these data centers faster?
Well, thanks a lot, Drew, for having me on. And I guess, Nat, we have something in common. We both baled hay as kids. So there you go. We're both farm kids. Pretty sure our careers diverged at that point. But I'm Craig Gordon. I lead the policy group at Mainspring Energy. And what Mainspring Energy is a Silicon Valley-based tech startup that actually has produced a linear generator. So not quite a fuel cell, as Isaiah mentioned, but what we have is a brand new category of power generation, which is fuel flexible, meaning that we can run on natural gas, we can run on hydrogen, we can run on ammonia, we can run on landfill gas, et cetera, propane. Anything that's gaseous and has energy, we can run it. And the difference between us and your typical engine or turbine is we don't have a flame in our system. Therefore, our NOx emissions are very low, which translates into the ability for us to operate our facilities in downtown Los Angeles 24/7, or for a data center 24/7. So what we have at Mainspring is a brand new paradigm of power generation that you just couldn't get before at the level of efficiencies that we're talking about now. We're comparable to a combined cycle plant, but we're in the space of a parking lot space, 20 feet long, the size of this stage. So it's a pretty big twist on the energy generation paradigm, and it comes at the right time as data centers are starting to soak up all the excess energy left on the grid, and it's leaving ratepayers kind of at risk. And what it's doing for us is enabling us to come and partner with data centers to provide on-site co-located generation, which can operate 24/7 until the grid gets there, during which time we can, or after which time we can revert to like a backup generator solution. So there's no need to double up on your diesel generator backups when you're deploying linear generators to your data center.
So I imagine siting a data center is all about supply and access to that supply, reliable supply. And in the past, Nat, maybe that was focused on how close you are to the grid and how quickly and easily can you connect. Is that still the case? Or you hear about islanding. Is islanding a possibility? And does islanding, though, also mean having something like Mainspring supply your power eventually one day as your primary source, but then your grid as your backup? Or give us a sense of what are the different options of energy mix that you've got currently in your tool set?
Sure. I'm going to start with the simple yes. Islanding is possible, and then caveat with the giant but. And one of the things that I think has been forgotten oftentimes in the quest for energy right now is all of the other variables that go into building a data center at scale. I certainly think that islanding is going to be part of the toolkit, but it's going to be part of many of the things that happen, not just as a moment in time, but along the life cycle of a data center. Recall that we're talking about 20-year assets on the data center. And once you're in a data center, it's rare to see somebody actually leave a data center. And I had to take a moment to buff Craig and the Mainspring team's metals, just an incredible group of entrepreneurs who are thinking about the technology and fuel inputs that will actually bridge towards the full life cycle of the data center, including possibly replacing backup diesel gen sets and thinking about perhaps cooling applications at a data center. But in regards to islanding, one of the things, we spend a lot of time, and I've been guilty of this, of throwing stones at dinner conversations and bus ride homes from frustrating utility meetings about utilities being slow moving. And one thing I think we forget, and I forget this, and I always take the opportunity to say this at these type of forums, is that culture that utilities have on the regulated side is deliberated. It was engineered and curated to make sure that we have a reliable and robust, low-cost power system. And while we sometimes get frustrated by their planning process and their mechanisms and their sometimes appearance of a lack of commercial creativity, the end product of how the regulated utility system works in the United States is that we have some of the most reliable, low-cost power in the world. And I think that's underappreciated. And if you think about the independent investments that hyperscalers and the IPP community is going to be making in tandem with utilities, I think that we're going to have even more resilient, low-cost, and reliable, and frankly, cleaner power system by bringing those forces together. So I think in the fullness of time, islanding is going to help us move fast and accelerate on AI, but I don't think it's going to be the enduring solution.
Do we have the technologies available to meet the demand that, I mean, you hear about the growth of demand that AI has brought, and I think some of the statistics I've heard is basically that, the growth in electricity in the past decade was basically flat. The growth in electricity in the next decade is going to be like 30x. And so I've heard different statistics, somewhere between 20 and 40. It's going to be a lot. So, I wonder, Craig, from your perspective, obviously you guys want to be a big part of that success of supplying that energy, but you've been in this industry long enough and you know the supply side. Do we have enough technologies and energy resources, and can we connect them fast enough for the appetite that we need to satisfy with this AI demand?
Tough question. I think we have the technologies to do it, but having been in the renewable development space, for 12 years prior to Mainspring, it's very challenging to develop anything new. Nat spoke to the social license of a data center. They need to be good community citizens. So do wind, solar, and storage facilities. So do linear generators. So the technology is there. The timeline, though, I think is very stretched. PJM has its generation interconnection queue, and it's got tens of thousands of megawatts of generators wanting to connect to the system, and they could, but for the fact that there's delays on transformers at grid level. There's delays on making other utility scale upgrades to the transmission system. And so when you pair that with the fact that we've lost a lot of base load and intermediate fossil generation in the last decade, it's a real challenge. And I think, at least in the interim, it does force companies like data centers that have a real motivation to get online fast to look at on-site power generation as one solution, one thing that they can do immediately to check a box to get online. Is it the ideal solution? No. A data center wants to be a data center. It doesn't want to be a power generation owner and operator. So I get that. And we should all stick to our core competencies, but for the near term, to make sure that the AI growth trajectory isn't stalled out, we should look at all options, whether it's linear generators, whether it's fuel cells, whether it's local wind, local solar. I'm not sure what it is. Virtual PPAs, we can do it all. You got a lot of innovation in the industry. What we don't have right now is a lot of stability in the industry, given everything that's going on up the hill. A lot of developers are kind of upside down, trying to understand what they're going to do next and how they're going to get their projects done. That creates more drag on the system, which is going to slow down the pace by which these data centers are able to get power affordably and reliably.
Nat, did you want to comment on that? I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what do you see? What's the workhorse power supply now for data centers, and what do you see as the workhorse power supply for data centers in the next 10, 20 years?
The workhorse supply for data centers is very much the grid, and if you go peel back the layer on what's underpinning grid reliability, it's no doubt intermittent renewables combined with peaking gas resources. And what's fascinating to me is the level of discourse that happens around the world where you have that resource mix, which really in the fullness of time is going to look like the resource mix that's global rather than just regional. Storage, carbon-free renewables, nuclear on the horizon, and then gas is that dispatch resource to go solve that. And what's fascinating is how that discourse happens within these halls, or if you go sit down with executives from Bonneville or system operators in Ireland or anywhere in the world, they all reconcile it. That's the truth. But I think what's happening with 2025 and 2026 is the year of authenticity about those conversations. And I'm really excited for us to go embrace the hard facts about what it takes to have a reliable system. And I think what that's going to mean is some milestone bilateral contracts between hyperscalers and thermal assets. There's no shortage of a parade of press releases celebrating PPAs between renewable energy resources and hyperscalers. I'm waiting for the day when we go have, perhaps not a celebration, but an acknowledgement of the fact that we are privileged to have a reliable, low-cost power system, and that is celebrated with a marquee announcement between a thermal resource and a hyperscaler. And I think that we're going to have some of those contracts because capacity is key today. everything, the last 10 years have been dominated by BPPAs. And it's just amazing the disconnect between capacity and renewable resources that occurs even within hyperscalers up until the last several years. The last thing I'll just comment on that, do we have the technology? I would say it's more of a question of will. And I'm reminded that just being in this building, I get chills, frankly, because I'm from Seattle. It's not as old city as DC. When I walk around this city, I'm just amazed at what can be built if we have the will and the engineering know-how, which is in no shortage in this country. When we look back at the level of generation that we're having to go build to meet the challenge that's in front of us, you can go debate the statistic, but the number that people index on often is by 2030, we're going to need anywhere between 30 and 35 gigawatts of AI load alone. So ironically enough, I used ChatGPT for this research a few months ago, which is the last time we've had that level of generation mobilized in this country was during World War II. And that was cobbled together largely through hydro resources and coal resources through TVA, BPA, and independent power producers. And this is pre-EPA, pre-DOE, pre-litigation, pre-everything. And that time period, we put roughly 25 to 30 gigawatts. So if you think about the industrial challenge that's in front of us, it's basically wartime levels of mobilization for generation to go meet, which is arguably one of the biggest national security issues that our country faces, along with all the secondary, tertiary benefits that accrue as a result of AI.
So that brings up, in my mind at least, the issue of permitting challenges, regulatory hurdles. I mean, Craig, from your perspective, what do you need to change faster so that you can scale faster?
Yeah, so I think the speed at which the utilities were able to do that in the 1940s reflects the fact that there was urgency and there was a lack of bureaucracy. Like right now, I know we had speakers yesterday talking about PJM and the need for some revisions to how the market rules work, and that is a very litigious process. It takes time, and unfortunately, it gets in the way of making real change fast. So we do need some constructs that are slightly different that are going to enable on-site power generation for data centers without pushing too much cost onto the other ratepayers. I mean, there's got to be equities in the system, but right now there's so much bureaucracy. At the RTO level, some state regulators don't know what to do with any of this. They don't want to get more flexible to deal with their IOUs that they're managing and the data centers that want to come onto their system. Everyone's kind of like deer in the headlights, just kind of like I am right now, very bright lights. So you kind of need the regulatory bodies to get up to speed and get up to speed very quick. Maybe GPT can help with that.
Yeah, so you mentioned PJM a couple of times and also ratepayers. And so I think one of the statistics that we found Bloomberg provided was that PJM raised costs by $9.4 billion as an expense to the consumers from everywhere from Illinois to DC. You're going to have to bear that cost based on increased demand, primarily from the growth of data centers and AI. So how do we meet the demand of that energy, knowing that it's going to increase demand and then therefore increase prices of energy? And people want more energy. They want more AI. This is in some ways, it's being very market driven, and yet no one likes high electricity prices. And so how does the data center community think about, if you go to a town hall meeting, how do you respond to angry ratepayers for their rates going up? Craig, I'll start with you because you raised it, but then Nat, we'll go to you, so you'll both have to answer this one.
Well, I think it's a really complicated problem. PJM has this capacity construct, which is something that changes, it seems like, every year, and it only provides visibility into capacity prices 3 years out at best. And so it doesn't send a long-term market signal to build new generation when you're actually going to need it. And then, of course, the AI revolution came out of nowhere in the last 2 years, and no one was planning for it. The IPPs weren't looking at new intermediate resources, and so the system got upside down, prices blew up. I'm not sure there's a simple solution, but I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the data centers to figure out how they're going to mitigate cost impacts to the ratepayers, and maybe that's bringing their own power at least initially, to those data centers.
So, Nat, I'll let you off the hook on this one unless you want to chime in quickly, because I do want to ask another question before we lose time.
I do have to chime. I was smirking a little bit because I was trying to game out this very question with our entitlements and local planning team, who was going to a council meeting, and I gave them this very elegant, long-winded answer. And as I heard myself, sometimes you hear yourself talking, and you're like, "You sound so pointy-headed, and you're going to send that team on a suicide mission with that argument." And unfortunately, the argument is very subtle. And I think the real simple solution is the fact that this is going to be a two-putt play. Practitioners and people in this space know that we've chronically underinvested in infrastructure in this country, particularly in the power space, and that is going to necessitate cost pressure, which means rates go up. I think the way to go create a balm on that, or a bit of a way to soften that blow, is for hyperscalers and regulators to seek bilateral constructs where the trade is they'll be willing to pay for a little bit of some of the initial capex, but that's got to come with more robust SLAs than they're getting from utilities today. I may be willing to go put billions of dollars of capex at play, but I have to have a deterministic date about when I'm going to get power delivered to my sites. And I might be willing to go firewall ratepayers from that. So you're going to need sympathetic utility commissions and regulators that will allow those type of constructs to happen. So it's a bit of a two-putt.
So one last question, because we're out of time, but the RFI from Department of Energy about co-locating data centers and energy at national labs, is this of interest to you? And if so, what are the key things that you need to see happen to really make that then happen for your business?
Sure, I'll just do the quick 60-second lightning round and just focus on one in particular. I think it has the attributes that are important. Back to the top of the hour, again, the data center building block is, I think the DOE is going to be most successful if it harnesses all the benefits that accrue as a result of that RFI at scale, which means large sites. So, 50 acres is not as compelling as, say, 500 acres in Tennessee at Oak Ridge. That's really compelling. And then when you go check the list of variables, access to gas pipelines, access to expertise in utilities that are sympathetic to integrating new resources and understanding the investment and operational technical difficulty involved in that, that's really important. And then I think one of the other things that's really missed in this whole bit is when people talk about building these 1 and 2 gigawatt data centers, where are you going to get your workforce? Anyone who's flown over IAD and seen a data center in construction will see an entire fleet of pickup trucks. And those are for a 50, 35 megawatt data center. We already have a hard time getting trades in this country. And I think that there's a missed opportunity that the market may solve, or could have a great place for catalyst for federal policy, is how do we go incentivize trades to go meet the challenge that's in front of us? So if you're going to go build a 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt data center campus, that's 10 years of construction if you follow a data center build schedule per hull. That is thousands of skilled tradespeople at a site every single day building for 10 years. So when you think about what can you build, think about who's going to build it and what community is going to be participating. So if you have DOE land that's 2 hours aside from any metro place, you can just go do your basic economic input-output analysis, say, is there a workforce there that's actually going to go support that site? And I think that sometimes is a missed opportunity on both sides, the demand and the supply side bit.
Good, thank you. 30 seconds, Craig, your response?
We'll go where the customers are.
All right, with that, we'll leave it. Thank you, gentlemen.